With a job interview I lied at. I once completely lied in a job interview. They asked if I knew how to use a program I had only heard about the night before. I said yes with full confidence, then went home and spent the next 48 hours straight learning it from YouTube videos. By the time I started the job, I actually did know how to use it. 6 months later, I got promoted for being a quick learner. To this day, I don't know if that was bold or just reckless, but it worked.
Close call moments. I was driving home late after a long shift, exhausted, hungry, and barely keeping my eyes open. It was one of those nights where the roads are quiet and your mind starts drifting. I got a text, nothing important. Just a friend asking if I made it out of work. I glanced down, 2 seconds, maybe 3. When I looked back up, the car in front of me had slammed on their brakes. I panicked, swerved hard to the right, and somehow ended up on the shoulder without hitting anyone. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking. I sat there, breathing heavy, headlights still on, completely frozen. The driver in front of me never even looked back. They kept going, but I stayed there for a long time, staring at the road, realizing how close I came to ruining someone's life. Or my own. That one moment changed everything. I used to think I could multitask, that a quick glance was harmless, but it's not. That night made me realize how fast things can go wrong. Now my phone stays in the glove compartment. Not because I'm scared, but because I was lucky, and not everyone gets a warning.
I never said it, but I meant it. I'm not the best with words. Never have been. I didn't grow up in a house where people said, "I love you" out loud. We just showed up, did our part, and kept going. But when my kid was born, something shifted. I still didn't say much, never wanted to smother them or make things awkward. But I was there. Every school pickup, every late night fever, every broken heart they didn't want to talk about. I remember once, they asked why I never said it, why I never told them I was proud. I froze. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I didn't know how to say it right. So I just said, I don't always say it out loud, but I mean it. Every single day. And I hope they knew that every light left on, every extra shift I worked, every quiet moment we shared was my way of saying it.
To the father who never showed up. I used to wait by the window every other weekend. He always said he'd come get me. Sometimes he showed up late, sometimes not at all. My mom would try to explain, say he was busy, but even as a kid I could tell he just didn't want to be there. Birthdays were the hardest. He would call days later and say he forgot, or worse, act like it didn't matter. For a long time I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe if I did better in school or smiled more, he'd stick around. But I've grown since then, and I've learned that his absence was never about me. It was about him. You can't force someone to be a father. They either show up or they don't. And the truth is, sometimes the strongest parent is the one who stayed. With the message I never deleted. It's been 3 years and I still haven't deleted the voicemail. It's not long, just my dad saying he'd be late to dinner, that he'd make it up to me. He never got the chance. Car accident, wrong place, wrong time. That voicemail used to hurt to hear. I couldn't even press play without crying. But now, it's different. Now it reminds me that even on an ordinary day, someone can leave behind something that stays with you forever. I don't listen to it often, just when I miss him a little more than usual. And somehow hearing "Hey kiddo" again still makes me feel like he's right there.
The best day. Wasn't big people ask me sometimes, what was the best day of your life? They expect a big answer. My wedding, the day my first kid was born, maybe when I bought my first house. Those were good days, sure. But the best day? It was quiet. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special happened. I was sitting on the porch in an old chair that creaked every time I leaned back. The sun was just coming up, the air still cool. My granddaughter came out in her pajamas, holding a bowl of cereal that was mostly milk and sugar. She didn't say a word, just sat down next to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. We sat there for a while, not rushing, not talking much. Then she pointed up and asked me what clouds were made of. I told her, mostly stories. She laughed so hard she spilled her cereal, and we both just laughed together until our sides hurt. That was it. No big event, no photos. Just a small, ordinary morning that felt like everything was exactly right. People spend their whole lives chasing big moments. But me? I think the best ones sneak up on you while you're sitting still, just paying attention.
The compliment I never forgot. The compliment I never forgot came from a complete stranger. I was in line at the grocery store wearing a hoodie, hair a mess, feeling like the world was sitting on my chest. It had been a rough week, nothing dramatic, just the kind of quiet heaviness that sneaks up on you. I wasn't talking, barely looking up, just trying to get through the day. Then the woman behind me tapped my shoulder and said, "I don't know if anyone's told you this, but you have a really peaceful vibe." She smiled like it was the most normal thing in the world. I just stood there, speechless. No one had ever called me peaceful before, not even close. But in that moment, her words felt like medicine. She didn't want anything. She wasn't trying to be deep. She just saw something good in me when I couldn't. That was 2 years ago. I've forgotten what I bought that day, but I remember her face, her voice, and that compliment. Some words stay with you forever. The one time I lied and never got caught. The one time I lied and never got caught was in 10th grade. My best friend forgot their presentation and they were panicking, red face, shaking hands, nearly in tears. When the teacher asked what happened, I raised my hand and said I had accidentally taken their flash drive home. Total lie. My friend looked at me confused for a second, then caught on and nodded. The teacher gave them an extension without asking more questions. After class, my friend hugged me and didn't say anything else. We never talked about it again, but that moment, it wasn't about cheating or rules. It was about stepping up for someone when they were falling apart. I've told a lot of truth since then, but that one lie, I'd do it again.
The stranger who paid for my groceries. I was standing in line at the store with my baby on my hip, counting every dollar in my hand, hoping I had enough. It had been a rough month with the rent, bills, diapers, and gas. It was down to the basics: bread, formula, a box of rice. When I got to the register, I came up short. Just a couple dollars, but still too much. My baby started fussing, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. I quietly started putting things back, trying not to cry. Then the guy behind me stepped forward and said, "I've got it." I told him he didn't have to, and he just smiled and said, "Someone once did it for me." I never got his name, but I think about him every time I see someone struggling in line, and now I always pay it forward.
The friend I had to let go. I had a friend I grew up with, the kind of friend who knew all my secrets, my first crush, the name of my childhood dog, even the things I was too afraid to admit out loud. We went through everything together, but as we got older, things started to change. I noticed I was the only one putting in effort. I would call and they would not answer. I would text and they would leave me on read. I invited them to my birthday and they said maybe, but never showed up. So one day I stopped trying. I did not text and I did not call. I waited to see if they would notice. A week passed, then a month, then a year, nothing. No check-in, no hey, no I miss you. And that is when it hit me. Some friendships do not end in arguments. They end quietly, with one person realizing they have outgrown being an option. I used to think closure meant a final talk or some dramatic ending, but sometimes the silence is the answer. And learning to let go of people who do not choose you back, that is peace disguised as heartbreak. Teacher, who's the worst student you ever had? There was this one student named Kyle. He wasn't the worst because he was loud or disruptive, though he was both. He was the worst because he was smart and knew it. He challenged every lesson, mocked other students for asking questions, and treated the classroom like his personal comedy stage. Nothing I said ever seemed to reach him. One day, I found a note he left behind, a drawing of me with the words, "waste of a salary." That one stung. Years later, I saw him working at a gas station. He looked up, recognized me, and nodded. No words, just a nod. Maybe he changed, maybe not. But I'll never forget how one student made me question everything I loved about teaching. The most unexpected lesson you ever learned. The most unexpected lesson I ever learned came from getting stranded on the side of the road. My car broke down around midnight in the middle of nowhere, and my phone barely had 1 bar of signal. I was panicking, heart racing, imagining every horror movie scenario. Then an old man in a rusty pickup truck pulled over. No questions, no weird vibes. He handed me a flashlight, pulled out jumper cables, and stayed with me until roadside help arrived. We barely spoke, just small talk and silence. Right before he left, he said, "Don't judge people by the paint job. Rust can carry more weight than chrome." I didn't fully get it then, but the words stuck. Over time, I realized he was right. Sometimes the people who look the roughest are the ones who show up when no one else does. Which moment were your parents most proud of you? It was 7th grade, and there was a kid named Ryan who got picked on every day. He was quiet, wore the same hoodie all the time, and never looked anyone in the eye. The popular kids made him their target, and most of us just watched. I did too, until the day they cornered him at lunch and knocked his tray to the floor. Something in me snapped. I stood up, walked over, and told them to back off. My voice was shaking, but I didn't stop. I helped Ryan up and sat with him for the rest of lunch. I didn't think much of it until I got home, and my mom said the school had called. I thought I was in trouble, but instead she gave me the tightest hug and said, "We're proud of you." That was the first time I ever saw my dad tear up, not because of grades or awards, but because I stood up for someone when it really mattered. What's something you always regretted? In high school, my best friend and I did everything together until I got caught up in the wrong crowd. They made fun of him for being quiet, for not partying, for actually caring about school. I never joined in, but I never defended him either. I laughed when they did. He stopped sitting with me at lunch, stopped texting back. The last time I saw him was graduation day. He gave me a small nod, and that was it. I've done a lot of growing since then, but I still think about how I let someone down who never let me down. I'd trade a lot to go back and speak up when it actually mattered. What happened to the guy that peaked in high school? His name was Jake. Star quarterback, dated the prettiest girl, always center of attention. At 17, he walked the halls like he owned them. Everyone wanted to be him or be near him. After graduation, he stuck around town, always talking about the good old days. He got a job at the local hardware store and still wore his Letterman jacket well into his 20s. At reunions, he told the same stories, laughed the same laugh, but something was missing behind it. The spotlight dimmed, and he never found a new stage. Last I heard, he was still in town, still chasing a moment that had already passed. What's your proudest accomplishment? I grew up in a tiny apartment with thin walls and thinner meals. My mom worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep the lights on. No vacations, no new clothes, just quiet strength and coffee at 5 a.m. every day. I remember once asking her why she never bought anything for herself, and she just smiled and said, "Moms eat last." That stuck with me. I studied hard, got into college on scholarships, worked nights, and built a small business from the ground up. It took years, but it grew. One morning, I handed my mom a set of keys to a new house and told her she never had to work again. She cried. I did too. I've made money, I've hit goals, but nothing beats the moment I gave my mom back the peace she gave gave up for me. That's my proudest accomplishment. What made you quit on the spot? It was my 3rd month working at a local cafe. The pay was low, the shifts were long, but I needed the job. The owner was strict, but I kept my head down and did what I was told. One morning, I came in early to prep like always, only to find the owner yelling at another employee over a spilled milk carton. She was new, clearly overwhelmed, and shaking. Instead of helping, he kept calling her useless and asking if she even knew how to wipe a floor. I stepped in and said calmly, "She's doing her best." He turned to me and snapped, "You want to defend her? Then you both can leave." So I did. I took off my apron, handed it to him, and said, "Gladly." I walked out with the new girl right behind me. We got coffee down the street. Best decision I ever made.
Am I the asshole for not helping my cousin move after she said my job isn't real work? I'm 26 and work from home as a freelance graphic designer. I make decent money, manage my own clients, and put in long hours. Just because I'm home doesn't mean I'm not working. My cousin Leah, who is 29, just moved into a new apartment and asked me to help her move over the weekend. I told her I was booked with deadlines and wouldn't be able to make it. She rolled her eyes and said, "Must be nice to sit in pajamas and play on your laptop all day." I let it slide at first, but later at our aunt's birthday dinner, she said in front of everyone, "Some of us actually have real jobs and can't just color all day." I was pissed. I said, "Funny, my coloring paid off my car and half of Mom's medical bills last year. What did your real job do?" She got quiet and later texted me saying I embarrassed her and could have just helped her instead of being so sensitive. Now the family is split. Half think I should have ignored her and helped anyway because family comes first. The other half say she had it coming. So, am I the asshole for not helping her move after she insulted my work?
How did you get fired? I was working at a retail store where management cared more about speed than people. One day, an elderly customer was struggling with her bags, so I stepped out from behind the register to help her to her car. It took maybe 3 minutes. When I got back, the assistant manager was waiting, arms crossed. She said I left the register unattended, even though there were no customers in line. I explained the situation, but she cut me off and said, "We're not paying you to play hero." The next day, I was called into the office and fired for abandoning my post. That was the moment I realized some jobs really don't deserve good people.
What made you quit your job? My work-study job was supposed to be simple. File papers, run copies, smile at staff. But no one warned me about the copy machine from hell. It jammed every 10 minutes, made awful grinding noises, and leaked toner like it was alive. The manager treated every jam like it was my personal failure. I was paid minimum wage to do maximum nonsense. One time, I stayed late fixing a mailing list error that would have cost them days. No one said thank you. But when I showed up 10 minutes late the next morning, the manager pulled me aside and said, "This is a professional environment." Professional? The staff spent half the day gossiping and the other half handing me pointless tasks, like alphabetizing expired memos. I lasted 6 weeks. One morning, after yet another paper jam and another lecture, I quietly clocked out and walked away. Best decision I made all semester.
The grass is greener. Darren moved into Maple Ridge thinking it'd be peaceful. Clean sidewalks, quiet neighbors, and a cute little townhouse with a backyard for his dog Max. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a fresh start. Then the letters started coming. First it was the trash can being visible from the street. Then it was his grass, 1 inch too long. After that, a strongly worded notice about his porch lights not matching the HOA's approved aesthetic. He tried to laugh it off. They're just being picky, he told himself. But it didn't stop. HOA, President Mrs. Whitmore, who seemed to treat the community like her personal kingdom, started showing up at his door. "Just a friendly reminder," she'd say with that tight smile. "We like to keep things uniform here." Darren started to feel like a prisoner in his own home. He couldn't plant vegetables, he couldn't paint his mailbox, he couldn't even set up a little fence for Max without submitting a 6-page form and waiting for the monthly HOA meeting. One day, he got fined for having unauthorized decorative elements, aka a garden gnome his niece had given him. That was the last straw. Darren decided to do something no one had dared to do in years, run for the HOA board. The neighbors laughed at first until Darren started knocking on doors, listening to everyone's stories. The retired couple were fined for wind chimes. The single mom wrote up for her kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk. The veteran next door who got a warning over his flagpole. People were tired. At the next election, Darren won by a landslide. Mrs. Whitmore was not amused. Within weeks, he rewrote outdated rules, pushed for common sense guidelines, and brought in a little thing called compassion. Suddenly, gnomes were allowed, kids could play freely, and nobody had to measure their grass with a ruler anymore. Maple Ridge didn't fall apart. It got better. And Mrs. Whitmore? She moved. Turns out the grass really is greener when the people in charge stop acting like they own it.
The second phone. Maya had always trusted James. Not just because they had been together for 4 years, but because he had that calm, reassuring way about him. The kind that made you feel safe, even when life was messy. They had their routines. Late-night ice cream runs, Sunday hikes, inside jokes no one else understood. She was never the suspicious type. But then she saw the second phone. It slipped out of his gym bag one morning while he was in the shower. It had a black case, a cracked screen, and a lock screen that lit up with a message from someone named Elena. The text read, Last night was amazing. Miss you already? Maya stared at the screen, her chest tightening, heart pounding in her ears. She told herself there might be a rational explanation, something innocent, something she had misunderstood. But deep down, she knew. That night, she waited until after dinner, then calmly asked, "Who's Elena?" James froze for a second, just a second, and that was all it took. His face shifted. He tried to laugh it off, said it was just a friend, and said it was nothing. But Maya had already seen the texts, the calls, the late nights that finally made sense. She did not cry. She did not yell. She simply looked at him and said, "I hope she was worth it." He did not follow her when she walked out, and she never looked back. A few days later, she packed her things, blocked his number, and started over. It hurt in a way she had never expected, like something was being carved out of her. But slowly, the pain turned into something else. A quiet strength. A reminder that sometimes the person you think would never lie to you is the one hiding a second life in a pocket. And sometimes choosing yourself is the beginning of everything.
All the answers. The day of the big history exam, the entire class already had the answers. It started with one student snapping a picture of the teacher's key left on her desk, then sharing it with a friend. By morning, it had made its way to everyone. Phones buzzed under desks, eyes avoided contact, and no one said a word. When the test began, the room was silent. Too silent. Even the usual troublemakers finished fast. The teacher, Ms. Dalton, watched them closely, her smile faint. The next day, she handed the test back without a word. Every student had scored 100. Perfect. Identical. At the end of class, she pinned a new test on the board. Retake. Different questions. No phones. She looked at them and said, "Now let's see what you really know." No one spoke. No one moved. For the first time, the class realized knowing the answers isn't the same as earning them. Promotion day. Everyone at the office thought Jordan would get the promotion. He had the numbers, the work ethic, and the late nights to prove it. But when the email went out, it was Greg. Greg, who spent half the day talking about fantasy football and taking 2-hour lunches. Jordan smiled through the congratulations, but inside something cracked. That evening, he stayed late again and found the quarterly pitch Greg was supposed to deliver. Half finished, full of errors. Jordan fixed it. He always did. That Friday, their department head pulled him aside. "You know," she said, "Greg's not the best on paper, but I've noticed someone's always covering for him, quietly, consistently." She handed Jordan a folder. "There's another position. Better pay, more responsibility. This one isn't up for debate." As Greg stumbled through his promotion he didn't earn, Jordan walked into a role he actually deserved. Sometimes the quiet work speaks the loudest.
Behind the counter. It was Riley's third month working the returns desk at a big box store where the vests were blue. The carts squeaked like haunted house props, and customers lost their minds over expired coupons. The job didn't pay much, but it was honest work, and she survived on caffeine, sarcasm, and deep breaths behind the counter. Mondays were always the worst, and that's when Karen showed up. Not just any customer, a Karen stormed up to the counter with a clearly used blender and a crumpled receipt that looked older than her attitude. "This thing smells like burnt rubber and ruined my smoothie," she snapped, slamming it down. Riley kept calm, but the return window had passed 2 weeks ago. When she gently explained that, Karen huffed, "I don't want excuses. I want a refund. Or I'll call corporate." Riley paged her shift lead, Mark, who backed her up with a store credit offer. But Karen gasped like someone insulted her ancestors and stormed off, blender still in hand, yelling into her phone. The rest of the week brought 3 more Karens, one over bread, one over Halloween candy in November, and one because the self-checkout looked at her wrong. Riley kept showing up not for the job, but for the moments in between, like when Mrs. Patel asked about her day, or Jeremy from Toys gave her a sticker for surviving the shift. But then, on a quiet Tuesday, Karen came back with the same haircut, same energy, but this time holding a card. Riley braced herself, but instead of complaining, Karen looked her in the eye and said, "I was awful to you last week." She handed Riley a card with a handwritten note and a $5 coffee gift card inside, saying, "I was going through something. No excuse, but I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." Riley, shocked, smiled and said, "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." And they both laughed. After that, the job didn't seem so bad. Karen still existed, the cart still squeaked. But sometimes people came back not just for returns, but to make things right. And sometimes I think it is enough.
"You'll miss me when I'm gone." Everyone knew Marcus wasn't a great manager. He had a habit of talking over people in meetings, taking credit for ideas that weren't his, and blaming his team when things went sideways. He thought being the boss meant being the loudest voice in the room, not the one people actually listened to. But there was one person on his team who kept everything running, Tasha. Tasha didn't complain. She didn't argue. She just handled her business. When clients were angry, she smoothed things over. When deadlines were tight, she made it work. Half the department leaned on her, even Marcus, though he'd never admit it. So when Tasha asked for a raise after 3 years of going above and beyond, Marcus didn't even look up from his screen. "You should be grateful to even have this job," he said. Tasha paused. "I've trained 3 new hires, built out our entire onboarding process, and fixed your last client mistake. Grateful isn't the word I'd use." Marcus laughed. "If you think you're that important, go test the waters. See who's really hiring." So she did. 2 weeks later, Tasha handed in her notice. She had a better offer with better pay, and a boss who actually listened. When she walked out that Friday, no drama, just peace. The next Monday, things started to fall apart. Nobody knew where key files were. A client email went unanswered. A report due at noon never got sent. The new hires kept asking questions no one could answer. Marcus scrambled. He tried reaching out to Tasha. Just a quick favor. But she was done. Respectfully. By the end of the month, Marcus was in hot water. Upper management wanted to know why his star performer left, why the department was lagging, and why clients were calling other reps instead of him. He had no real answers. What he did have was a growing realization. He didn't lose Tasha over money. He lost her because he thought she was replaceable. Turns out she wasn't.
Worth more than they knew. Jules had been running the back-end systems for 2 years, solo. When they got hired, the company was a mess. Broken processes, outdated software, servers crashing every other week. Jules stayed late, learned the entire system from scratch, automated half of it, and quietly made everyone's life easier. Payroll ran smooth. Customer data stayed safe. Salespeople could actually do their jobs. No big speeches, no flashy recognition. Just work done right. But when Jules finally walked into the manager's office and asked for a raise, the response was disappointing. "We value you," the manager said with a tight smile. "But we just don't have the budget right now." Jules blinked. "I literally saved you $40,000 a year automating processes you used to outsource. And we're grateful. Really. Let's revisit this in 6 months." Jules left that meeting feeling insulted. Not just underpaid, underestimated. So they quietly started looking elsewhere. 2 weeks later, they had an offer. Better pay, better hours, and respect built into the culture. Jules submitted their resignation without fanfare. The panic set in fast. Suddenly, they were being called into meetings with higher-ups who had never bothered to learn their name. "Let's talk about this," they said. "Surely we can work something out." But Jules had made up their mind. "I gave you a chance," they said simply. "You chose not to value me. Someone else will." When they left, nobody could figure out how to fix the systems Jules built. Deadlines were missed. Payroll glitched. The smooth machine they had created fell apart. Word got around. Jules, meanwhile, was settling into their new job. Appreciated, paid well, and finally seen. Sometimes walking away isn't quitting. It's just realizing what you're worth and refusing to accept less.
The manager nobody liked? Nobody liked her? Not the people on her team, not the new hires who came in bright-eyed and left 6 weeks later, not even the guy from IT. And he liked everyone. She wasn't loud or openly aggressive, no, her style was quieter, watching over shoulders, sending vague 11 p.m. emails, and turning praise into thinly veiled insults. She'd smile at you in meetings, then throw you under the bus in the follow-up summary to the higher-ups. Turnover in her department was through the roof, but somehow she kept climbing. Every quarter, her numbers looked perfect. Projects finished early, budgets stayed low, and she never missed a deadline. That was all leadership ever seemed to notice. Then the new guy showed up. Upper management had brought him in to boost morale and get in touch with the teams. He wore sneakers to meetings and said things like, "I want to build trust." Everyone assumed he'd finally see what was going on, and for a while, it looked that way. He scheduled one-on-ones with her team, let them speak freely. People opened up. They told him about the manipulation, the stress, the constant fear of failure. He nodded, took notes, thanked them for being brave. She got called into his office the next day. He laid it out. Employee feedback, morale concerns, poor team culture. "This isn't sustainable," he said. "We may have to make changes." She didn't argue, just pulled a small folder from her bag and slid it across the desk. Inside was everything: metrics, timelines, evidence that she had cleaned up disasters caused by others, emails showing that without her decisions, several projects would have failed. She had receipts, all of them. "I may not be warm," she said, calm and steady, "but I deliver, every time. And you don't keep people like me around for morale. You keep us around to keep the lights on." He didn't say much after that. A week later, she wasn't fired. She wasn't demoted. In fact, she got a bigger budget and more responsibility. Word spread fast. People were frustrated, disappointed, but no one was surprised. She wasn't the kind of manager you liked. She was the kind you couldn't afford to lose.
The group project. We all agreed to meet at noon. I showed up early with the slides finished, the charts color-coded, and the script rehearsed. This was 30% of our final grade. I wasn't about to let it tank. At 12:07, Jenna rolled in, iced coffee in hand, sunglasses on, like she was doing me a favor just being there. She hadn't touched her part. "I was so busy last night," she said, flipping her hair. "Can you just cover mine? You're better at talking anyway." Better at talking? I had stayed up until 3 a.m. covering for Jessica last week, who had tech issues and forgot to email me his part. John hadn't even replied in the group chat for 2 days, but he showed up too. Late, smiling, joking around like we weren't about to present in front of the entire class. I handed out the scripts. Just read what's on the page. Stick to your section. When we got called up, it all fell apart. Jenna mumbled. John ad-libbed nonsense. Jessica read the wrong slide. I salvaged what I could. Afterward, the professor emailed us our grade. A minus. I sighed in relief until I read the last line. Since I did not observe clear differences in contribution, all group members received the same grade. Same grade. They got my A. And the worst part? They walked out laughing, already talking about what they were doing tonight, like I hadn't just carried them on my back. Now I'm stuck wondering, do I say something to the professor? Or do I just let it go and move on?
With a fall and rise of Preston Hale. Preston Hale had never ridden a public bus in his life. Why would he? His family's estate had a garage full of luxury cars, and he had his own driver by the time he was 13. At 17, Preston was the type of kid who wore designer shoes to gym class and thought budgeting was something poor people did for fun. He wasn't a bad kid. Not really. Just out of touch. When his school held a canned food drive, he sent his housekeeper to buy the donations. When a classmate couldn't afford the field trip, he loudly offered to spot them, like a charity. Preston didn't mean to offend. He just didn't get it. That all changed one summer. His father, fed up with Preston's attitude, made a bold move. No Europe trip this year, he announced over breakfast. You're spending the summer working. Preston laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. The next week, Preston found himself in a scratchy polo shirt, clocking in at a local hardware store his father's company quietly owned. No one there knew who he was. Just another teenage employee making minimum wage. At first, Preston sulked. He didn't understand why customers were so impatient, or why his coworkers snapped at him when he messed up inventory. Relax, he'd say, flashing his usual smirk. But no one was impressed. Then came the turning point. One particularly hot day, a single mother came in trying to return a faulty fan. Company policy said no returns without a receipt. She looked exhausted, clearly working multiple jobs, and her son clung to her leg. Preston watched as she begged the manager, who refused with a shrug. Something clicked. He stepped in, quietly convincing the manager to make an exception. We've got 5 fans in stock. One of them's not gonna ruin us, he said. Later that week, he bought lunch for the crew out of his own paycheck. No flashy gestures, no Instagram posts, just pizza and gratitude. By the end of the summer, Preston had a new reputation. Still a little clueless, but humble, hardworking, and willing to listen. When school started again, Preston didn't brag about his summer, but when the canned food drive came around, he didn't just donate. He organized a team, collected from 10 neighborhoods, and loaded boxes into vans himself. For the first time in his life, Preston didn't feel rich because of what he owned. He felt rich because of what he learned. The king of the hallways. In middle school, Johnson was untouchable. He was tall, athletic, and loud. The kind of loud that silenced everyone else. He walked down the hallway like he owned it, shoving past people, mocking anyone who wasn't fast or cool or rich. I remember how he'd call me library rat just because I liked books and kept quiet. It stuck. Even teachers laughed sometimes. Freshman year, he tripped me in the cafeteria. I spilled my tray, face flushed red as ketchup, and he roared laughing. I'll never forget the sound of it. The way others joined in like hyenas, just to stay on his good side. That day, I swore I'd forget him someday. Just get through it. Let him win. Fast forward to a few years after graduation. I was back in town over the summer visiting my mom. I stopped by the gas station. Hot day. AC busted, the air thick with sweat and gasoline. There he was. Brandon. He was behind the counter. Name tag, greasy shirt, bags under his eyes. He looked older, somehow already worn out at 24. He didn't recognize me. I watched him force a smile at a customer who was yelling about a coupon. He kept nodding, apologizing, eyes darting to the clock like it might save him. No one laughed at his jokes. No one followed him around. He was just a guy, just tired. I paid for my gum and walked out without saying a word. He used to make me feel so small. Now, he barely filled the space he stood in. The rich kid who got a reality check. So back in high school, there was this guy, Brandon, 18. His parents were loaded, like private jet, brand new sports car on his birthday, daddy will sue you level rich. And he let everyone know it. He treated people like garbage, especially those who worked part-time jobs. He'd humiliate fast food workers, make fun of kids who couldn't afford designer clothes, and brag about how he'd never have to work a day in his life. His favorite target? Me, 17. I worked after school at a local diner to save up for college, and Brandon loved to come in with his friends just to make my life miserable. He'd snap his fingers at me like I was a servant. He once ordered $50 worth of food, took one bite, and said it was trash, then refused to pay, laughing as he left. He called me Burger Boy every time he saw me at school, but karma? Oh, she was waiting. One day, Brandon rolled into the diner with a smug grin, but this time, something was different. He wasn't in his usual designer clothes, he looked kind of miserable. Turns out his dad got caught in some shady business deals and lost almost everything. The house? Gone. The cars? Repossessed. The private school tuition? Poof. And the best part? Brandon had to get a job. Guess where? At my diner. The first time I saw him in that grease-stained uniform, barely knowing how to work the register, I almost lost it. Need any help, Burger Boy? I asked, smiling. Brandon turned bright red. He had no comeback. He had to take orders from me. And let me tell you, he struggled. He messed up orders, spilled drinks, and finally understood what it was like to be treated like dirt. One day, a group of kids from our school came in and mocked him, the same way he used to mock me, calling him Cashier Boy and laughing when he dropped a tray. Did I step in? Nope, because Karma, she was handling it just fine.
Blocked in. Janelle had lived in the same townhouse for 5 years. Quiet street, friendly neighbors, decent HOA, and no major issues. Except for Ray. Ray moved in 2 doors down with his loud music, mystery Amazon packages, and one incredibly annoying habit: parking his car in front of Janelle's garage. Not just once, not twice. All the time. At first, she let it go. Figured he'd realize it was someone's garage and move. But no, Ray acted like the space in front of her garage was his personal driveway. Meanwhile, she was stuck either honking at 7 a.m. or squeezing her car through a sliver of an opening just to get to work. She left a polite note. He ignored it. She knocked on his door once. He opened it halfway, nodded like he heard her, then parked there again the next day. She reported it to the HOA. They sent him a warning. He laughed about it on speakerphone with someone. Janelle could hear him through the wall. So she got smart. Next time Ray parked there, Janelle called a tow truck. The sign posted on the gate was clear: no blocking driveways or garages. She had receipts, photos, timestamps, and everything. 30 minutes later, his car was gone. Ray stormed over, red-faced and furious. You could have just asked. I did, Janelle said calmly. Twice. You didn't care. He tried to report her to the HOA, but the board sided with her. And just to drive the point home, they hit him with a fine and a formal notice. Next time, he'd be on probation. Ray didn't speak to her again, but he never parked there again either. Funny how fast people learn when their car disappears.
Am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents move in after they gave my college fund to my brother? I, 30, have always been the responsible child, while my younger brother, Jake, 28, was the golden boy. My parents favored him openly. He got whatever he wanted, while I had to work for everything. The biggest betrayal? They gave my entire college fund to Jake. I found out when I was 18, right before college. I had been accepted into my dream university, and when I went to discuss tuition, my parents casually said, "Oh, we used that money to help Jake start his business. You can take out loans." Jake's business? A luxury sneaker reselling scheme. It failed within a year. I was furious but had no choice. I took out loans, worked multiple jobs, and barely scraped by while Jake stayed home playing video games, waiting for my parents to fund his next big idea. Fast forward to now. I worked my ass off, built a solid career, bought a house, and became financially stable. Jake? Still mooching off my parents, unemployed and living in their basement. Here's where the karma kicks in. A few months ago, my parents lost their house due to financial mismanagement. Suddenly, they're calling me, asking to move in. I told them no. They tried guilt-tripping me. We're family. We raised you. How can you let us struggle? I reminded them that they made their choice years ago when they decided Jake's business was more important than my future. I told them, you have a son living in your basement. Go live with him. Now, the whole family is divided. Some say I'm being cruel and should forgive and forget. Others, especially my friends, say I owe them nothing. Aida for refusing to let my parents move in after they gave away my future?
Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my nephew after my sister called me just an accountant? I am 27, working full-time as an accountant and have a pretty demanding job, especially during tax season. My sister, Anna, 32, is a stay-at-home mom to my 4-year-old nephew, and she constantly asks me to babysit whenever she needs a break. I help when I can, but I've made it clear that my job is stressful and I don't always have the time. Last week, we were at a family dinner when she started venting about how exhausted she was and how I should step up as an uncle. I reminded her that I work long hours and don't have the flexibility she does. That's when she laughed and said, "Oh, please, you just sit at a desk all day. You're not a doctor or a firefighter. You're just an accountant." I was stunned. I work my ass off and my job pays for my apartment, my car, and everything I have. I told her if she really thought my job was so easy, she should go do it herself. She got defensive and said she was just joking, but I wasn't laughing. A few days later, she texted asking if I could babysit this weekend. I replied, "Sorry, I'm just an accountant, so I'm too busy sitting at my desk all day." She blew up, calling me petty and immature, and my mom says I should be the bigger person because family helps family. Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit after what she said? The inheritance letter. I grew up thinking my older brother Daniel was my best friend. We were only 3 years apart, inseparable as kids. Our parents ran a small vineyard in Northern California, and the plan was always that Daniel and I would take it over together one day, or so I thought. When my mom passed away suddenly 2 years ago, things changed. Our dad became quieter and Daniel took the reins, hosting meetings with distributors, hiring staff, handling all the numbers. I was more involved with the land and the grapes, up at 5 a.m., pruning, managing the harvest crew, doing the gritty work, and I loved it. I thought we were building something side by side. Then my dad got sick last year. It happened fast. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. In the weeks before he passed, he pulled me aside and told me, "You'll have what you need when I'm gone." I promise. I held on to those words like a lifeline. A month after his funeral, Daniel called a family meeting at the vineyard office. He pulled out a sleek envelope and said, "Dad updated the will right before he died." I was surprised, and he never mentioned that to me. The lawyer opened the letter and read it aloud. Everything, and I mean everything, was left to Daniel. The vineyard, the land, the house, even Dad's old pickup truck. The only thing I got was a note in my dad's handwriting that read, "I hope you find your own path, son. I trust Daniel to take care of things." I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was underwater, watching my whole life dissolve. After the lawyer left, I asked Daniel if he'd forged the will. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "It's not forgery if he signed it willingly." Turns out, while I was out tending the vines and sleeping on the floor during harvest season, Daniel was slowly convincing our dad that I didn't have the business sense to run the place, that I was too soft, that the vineyard needed someone tougher to survive. I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. Now I live in a small apartment 40 minutes away, working at a different winery. Every once in a while, I pass by the old vineyard. The vines still grow the way I trained them to, but I don't stop. I don't look back. I don't call Daniel anymore. The land used to be home. Now it just feels like a wound.
Am I the asshole for canceling a vacation I paid for after my boyfriend called me just his backup plan? I, 26F, have been dating my boyfriend, Leo, 28M, for almost 2 years. Things have been good overall, but lately I've been noticing a few red flags. He never really introduces me to his close friends, avoids posting me on social media, and sometimes jokes about how I got lucky landing someone like him. Anyway, a few months ago, I surprised him by booking a week-long vacation for us to Costa Rica. I used my bonus from work. I'm a software engineer, and paid for everything. Flights, hotels, excursions, even his passport renewal. He was excited, and I was too, until last weekend. We were at a friend's party, and I overheard him talking to one of his friends. The friend asked if he and I were getting serious, and Leo laughed and said, "She's great, but let's be real. She's kind of my backup plan. Like, if things don't work out with someone else, I could settle down with her." I stood there frozen, didn't even know what to say. He noticed me a few seconds later and tried to play it off like it was just guy talk, and I didn't mean it like that. I didn't argue. I just went home, canceled everything under my name, which was all of it, and sent him a polite text saying he should find a different backup plan to vacation with. Now he's blowing up my phone saying I'm overreacting, that I'm being cruel, and that I embarrassed him by telling his mom, who, for the record, asked why the trip was off and I told her the truth. His friends say I was petty. My friends say I should have dumped him months ago. So, am I the asshole?
The coffee cup. May worked as a receptionist at a sleek downtown firm. Every morning, she brought her own coffee in a reusable cup, a gift from her late grandma. It had little sunflowers and the words, "You've got this," printed on the side. One of the junior managers, Kyle, mocked her for it constantly. "Cute cup?" he'd smirk. "Going for the kindergarten teacher aesthetic?" Real professionals use espresso. May never responded, just smiled and kept sipping. What Kyle didn't know? May wasn't just the receptionist. She'd been working on a degree in business analytics at night, quietly, patiently. 2 months later, she was offered a full-time position on the strategy team in Kyle's department. Except she wouldn't be working with Kyle. She'd be working above him. Her first day in the new role, she walked past his desk, coffee cup in hand, and said, "Still using that drip machine, Kyle?" Though real professionals used espresso. She smiled and kept sipping.
Am I the asshole for not giving up my plane seat for a mom and her kid? So I, 28F, recently took a long flight for a work trip. Because I knew it would be exhausting, I paid extra to select a window seat ahead of time. Aisle seats make me anxious, and I like leaning against the window to sleep. When I got to my row, a woman, probably in her early 40s, was sitting in my seat with her young son, maybe 7 or 8, in the middle seat. I politely told her I had the window seat, and she just smiled and said, "Oh, I was hoping we could switch so I can sit next to my son." I glanced at her boarding pass. Her assigned seat was a middle seat in the very back of the plane. I asked, "What seat are you in?" She pointed to it and shrugged. I said, "Sorry, but I paid extra for this seat. I really need the window seat." Her smile dropped immediately. She let out this loud, exaggerated sigh and muttered, "Wow, some people have no compassion." Then she turned to her son and, loud enough for everyone around us to hear, said, "Sorry, sweetie, this lady won't let mommy sit with you. I guess you'll just have to sit all alone with a stranger." Now people were staring. A guy in the aisle seat looked uncomfortable. The flight attendant came over, and this woman immediately went full performance mode. "I just want to sit with my child, and she's refusing to switch. I don't understand how someone can be so selfish." The flight attendant looked at me, and I calmly said, "I paid extra for this window seat. I'm happy to trade with someone else for a comparable seat, but I'm not taking a middle seat in the back." The attendant turned to the mom and said, "Ma'am, you'll have to sit in your assigned seat unless another passenger is willing to switch." That's when she really lost it. She grabbed her bags aggressively, made a huge scene stomping to the back, and kept muttering, "I hope you sleep well knowing you made a child suffer." Meanwhile, the guy next to me gave me a thumbs up and whispered, "You did the right thing." I thought that was the end of it. But when I told my family later, my mom said, "You should have just switched. It wasn't that big of a deal." Now I'm wondering, am I the asshole?
The office jerk who got what he deserved. So I, 29F, work in a mid-sized corporate office, and for years we had to deal with Todd, 35M, the classic office jerk. You know the type. Loud, obnoxious, lazy, and somehow always taking credit for other people's work. Todd wasn't just annoying, he was a bully. He'd belittle junior employees, make sexist jokes in meetings, and worst of all, he was the boss's golf buddy. So no matter how much he slacked off, he never faced consequences. One time, my coworker Lisa, 27F, spent weeks working on a detailed client report, only for Todd to submit it under his name. She confronted him, and he just smirked and said, "It's all about who gets seen, sweetheart." Yeah, that kind of guy. Well, karma was waiting. Our company was planning a major expansion, and upper management announced they'd be choosing a new regional manager. Todd, of course, was acting like it was already his. He even joked, "Guess I should start picking out my new office." Little did he know, we were all sick of him. So a few of us, including Lisa, decided to play it smart. We started forwarding emails. Every time Todd took credit for someone else's work, we made sure to CC upper management. We collected receipts. Lisa had actual timestamps proving Todd never worked on the projects he claimed. We exposed his biggest lie. Todd had been faking sales reports to look more impressive, but we cross-checked them, and, surprise, the numbers didn't add up. When the final decision was made, Todd walked into the meeting cocky as ever, and walked out looking like a ghost. Turns out, upper management had been watching. Not only did they deny him the promotion, but when they confronted him about the falsified sales reports, he was fired on the spot. The best part? Lisa got the promotion instead. And Todd? The last we heard, he was working for a competitor in an entry-level position.